Marcy, Skylight, Gray, Cliff, and Redfield done. Now the long walk back to the lodge. 3:55 a.m., just signed in. Santanoni Range, let's go. The wind is whipping here in the Seward Range today. Just finished the Macomb slide and my legs are on fire. Well, I fell victim to the floating logs again. Made it to the top of East Dix. Peak number 3 of 5 for today here in the Dix Range. Avalanche Pass. On top of Rocky Peak Ridge. It's like a hurricane up here. Rain and wind here on Tabletop. Whiteface, number 6. Muddy day here on Street and Nye for number 7 and 8. Sunny and blue on Haystack. Algonquin, up in the clouds, number 18. Gothics, number 22. Panther, number 38. Allen, number 45. 7:12 a.m. Big Slide, Adirondack, 46er. You're listening to the 46 of 46 podcast. March 9th, 2019. Less than 2 weeks left of the quote-unquote official winter hiking season, though we all know the winter conditions in the Adirondacks extend far into May sometimes. But for these hiking challenges, there's only a couple weeks left. So in an effort to complete my Lake Placid Winter 9'er, today I would head to Wilmington to complete the secret gem next to Whiteface known as Bear Den Mountain and the often confusing animal of a mountain known as Catamount. The weather was going to be perfect today. Clear blue skies with temperatures in the low 30s. An excellent day to hit the trail. My plan on this 2-mountain day was to start with the 4.5-mile trip up Bear Den early in the morning, then drive over to Catamount and complete the steeper 4-mile journey up this sometimes confusing peak, often more challenging than many high peaks. It was a perfect day to finish my Lake Placid Winter 9'er. Like always, I got an early start and left my house in Saranac Lake at 4 a.m. Started driving over to Wilmington. The trailhead for Bear Den is at the Whiteface Mountain facility, so I arrived and pulled in, drove over the bridge with the gate. Sometimes the gate is closed, in which case you just have to park in a different lot and then walk over the trailhead, which isn't too far. But the gate was open, so I went over the bridge and turned right. Followed that road to the Bear Den parking lot, where the trailhead sign is in the corner to the left. Hard to miss it. At this pre-5 a.m. hour at Whiteface, there was very little activity going on, and it was a peaceful start to my day, with tons of stars in the sky. I was quite excited to hike today because I had recently purchased a brand new hiking pack that I got on sale at EMS, an Osprey Kestrel 48-liter pack that fit me very well. Up until this point, I have hiked every mountain that I've ever hiked with a regular EMS school book bag type backpack, which was fine and it served me very well, but I wanted a pack with a better way to strap on the snowshoes than just bungee cording them around my pack. That was the main reason. But I will also say, after hiking with a pack that fits my torso correctly, it's truly an amazing difference, and while a fancy backpack is obviously not necessary, it is pretty nice to have one. Today I changed up my layers as I continue to dial them in for winter hiking. At the recommendation of my buddy Eli, I wore base layers, gaiters, and basketball shorts over them, as opposed to my rain pants. I wasn't going to need the rain pants shell, and then the gaiters would keep the bottoms of my feet and legs dry. Until I fell down, of course, but we'll get to that. And then when I fell down again, but we'll get to that too. Then on top, my usual base layer, Techwick shirt, and a hat and gloves. And I will say this collection of layers was definitely the best yet for me in terms of keeping the sweat at bay. So thank you, Eli. Much appreciated. I closed my van door, grabbed my backpack, and it was time to hike. Clicked the headlamp on and signed into Bear Den at 5 a.m. And up the trail we went. I began with just my micro spikes, as the trail below was very hard and very packed down. Bear Den begins with a flat, wavy trail through the woods before climbing, and once it starts climbing, it has switchbacks throughout. But when the climbing does begin, it really doesn't let up until the top. So for being a smaller mountain, it certainly makes your legs and your lungs work for it. I carried on up the dark trail, crunching my way between trees, winding through the woods, hearing nothing but my footsteps over the sound of the dead winter's night silence all around me. The forest was quiet this morning. Around half a mile into the hike, I came to the trail junction for some mountain biking trails, since there's a large amount of bike trails back here as well. So at this point, you'll want to go left and carry on up to Bear Den. And around this point, the trail begins to climb as well as you walk on the ridge with the Ausable River down below. And there are many trail markers for the first half of the trail, but the second half could stand to use a few more, so definitely be paying attention. At this point in the trip, I noticed the snow on the trail getting heavier and heavier. And then I decided, okay, it's time to stop and put my snowshoes on instead. All right. Now we're really winter hiking, right? Snowshoes on. I carried on up the trail, along the Ausable River, flowing in the valley below, and the trail came to a split. And when I say trail, I simply mean the former hiker's tracks that I'm following while also looking for trail markers on the trees. It was a real fork in the road where I didn't quite remember there being a trail split here. So, decision time. In my mind, I had remembered the trail beginning to really climb eventually, and I felt like I had been walking along this ridge for quite some time, so I went left, thinking that that must be the proper route. Of course, a trail marker or two would help, but they aren't there. So I went left up the steep section. It was a very steep section, and after a few minutes of climbing up and holding trees, digging my snowshoes in so they don't slip, even though they constantly were slipping, I started to feel like, I don't think this is the right way. But I carried on, thinking that maybe the winter bushwhack would eventually come out to the real trail. And midway up another steep section, I stepped right out of my snowshoe. Great. So I grabbed the shoe, and in as clumsy a manner as you could ever imagine, I tried putting it back on while also holding on to a tree, trying not to slide back down this 15-foot steep climb that I was stuck in the middle of. Man, I wish I was more flexible, I'm thinking to myself. But after a minute or two of fumbling around, I finally got the snowshoe back on and I kept climbing up. The trail I was following now leveled out a little bit as I was walking across the ridge, but the tracks eventually came to a halting stop. They just simply disappeared. They've either been covered with snow, the people turned around, or they just vanished into thin air, like a UFO. So at this point, I decided to carry on and push further, hoping I'd eventually see a trail marker or the trail or more footsteps. And then it happened again. I stepped out of my not tight enough snowshoe. Again. Okay. Well, once again, here I am in mid-thigh deep snow on the side of a hill that's obviously not the trail, trying to hold on and not slide down while also trying to put my snowshoe back on again. And once again, it was a struggle. And it was at this point where I thought to myself, dude, you know what? I am done winter hiking. This sucks. I'm just going to wait until summer. Then I finally got it back on and decided to turn around and head back for that little trail junction with footsteps that I saw earlier and maybe check out to see if the other junction was the right trail. Maybe. But I'm quitting. I'm done. And then as I carried on backtracking my steps, now going down those steep sections that were hard to climb up, I was falling down left and right. Nothing was going right. I find in the winter that I struggle to keep my weight forward out of fear of tripping over forward and falling on my face to faceplant. But then all that actually does is keep my weight back, and then I slip and fall backwards, thus defeating the purpose of trying not to fall. Instead of falling forward, I fall backwards. Constantly. I'm constantly falling backwards. So stupid. So down I went, over and over again, probably 3 times during this little quarter-mile stretch. It was not going well. So I eventually came back to the footsteps junction that I went left at earlier, and I said, I'll take a quick look up the trail, but I don't feel like getting lost solo in the winter here in the woods by myself. So I'm probably just going to go home today because I hate this. Winter hiking sucks. I'm sick of hiking by myself. I'm done. And then like a light from the heavens, in the distance, maybe 30 yards up the trail, I saw a trail marker. There it was, some confirmation that now I'm going the correct way. I needed that. And with this, I decided to carry on up the trail, and my winter hiking career would live to see another day. Instead of retiring early, of course. And shortly after this point, the trail was covered and I would break trail from here to the summit. Thankfully, I was able to eyeball a number of trail markers while I was breaking trail. The thing about this peak, and other winter peaks, is when the leaves are all off the trees and the forest is so open, it feels like anything could be the trail. So fortunately, I followed my gut and I was able to find trail marker after trail marker as I carried on up the snow-covered mountain trail, a picture-perfect winter landscape, might I add. It was almost a shame to damage the perfect views with my snowshoes and my tracks. But you know, the summit called, so up I went. Step after step in the 12 to 15-inch snow I went, leaving nice long tracks in the snow with my snowshoes. Just before the summit, after following trail marker after trail marker and guessing this way or guessing that way where the trail's supposed to go, and usually being successful, thankfully, I met back up with another set of prints. Clearly someone else's bushwhack trail, possibly the trail I followed earlier, I don't know. But after passing a small wooden sign on a tree with an arrow that says Bear Den, I went left and shortly after came out on the summit ledge, overlooking the sun rising with a golden light on White-Faced Mountain, lighting up the ski trails for the first runs. It was excellent. Bear Den Mountain, 2,650 feet for Lake Placid Winter 9'er number 8 of 9. The summit here has many different areas, cairns, and whatnot. It's actually a very long summit, so you can explore while you're up there, but once you come out on a rocky ledge and you see White-Face majestically towering above, you're basically there. I sent a photo of Algonquin from Bear Den to a buddy of mine who was hiking Algonquin on the same day at the same time, and then he sent a photo back. It's always neat knowing while you're standing on one of these mountains, there's other people currently climbing up the other mountains that you're looking at, having their own adventure. It took me an hour and 35 minutes to summit today, which was significantly longer than it took me back in the summer, basically double the time, but the snow and the breaking trail and the backtracking I did added to that. I stayed for a good 15 minutes and I enjoyed the sun rising before I started back down the trail. Now earlier I mentioned my constant sliding and falling backwards, so on the descent I decided to start leaning forward more and just commit to it. And I basically started skiing down the trail on my snowshoes. It was so fast and actually very fun. On this powdery, snowy trail, I made incredible time going down as I skied the trail, ducking and dodging trees like an Olympic downhill skier going through the flags and the gates. Once I made it back to the Footsteps Trail junction from earlier, I laid some branches over the wrong trail to hopefully alert other hikers that this isn't the way to go. Then towards the bottom, I came across my first couple of the day, where I mentioned to them the correct trail, hoping they could avoid the confusion that I had and stay on my freshly broken trail. There's another life lesson here. You know, just because there's tracks from previous people doesn't necessarily mean it's the correct way to go. You know, some sort of life analogy there from the trail. I made it off the mountain in about 35 minutes, so fast. And upon signing out, I saw a few days earlier another guy named James had signed in attempting to do the LP9 Winter Ultra, which is all 9 mountains in the winter in 24 hours. Craziness. And I found out that he wasn't able to finish it that day due to cramping, but then he went at it and tried it again a couple weeks later with another guy named Jacob, and they both finished, becoming the first and currently only Lake Placid 9 Winter Ultra finishers. So impressive. So I walked back to my van, parked right next to the trailhead here at the Bear Den parking lot, and I started driving over to Catamount for my final Lake Placid Winter 9'er peak. Pure ADK is an online community and lifestyle brand that creates Adirondack-inspired apparel and goods. They're all about sharing their adventures and creating quality products that are a reflection of the outdoor lifestyle and activities we love in the Adirondack Mountains. Whether born and raised an Adirondack native or a frequent vacationer, we all have a common bond, those feelings and memories that the Adirondacks evoke in us. As a bonus for listeners of the podcast, they're providing a 15% off discount. When shopping in their online store, use the promo code 46podcast to redeem the offer. PureAdirondacks.com. Check it out. 46podcast. Pure ADK. Exploration unbound. Probably a 15-minute drive over to the Catamount trailhead from Bear Den, which is always one of my favorite mountains to go to because I love how the mountain sits alone, and when driving up to it, the mountain just towers above and then it suddenly appears from behind the trees. Always a great view. I pulled into the lot and started gathering my gear. Shortly after, another car with a group of 4 hikers pulled into the parking lot. When they got out, we started chatting, and it turns out the 4 of them were also finishing up their own winter LP9'er challenge today on Catamount. So we all had that in common.